think that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions that an art director has made by the time that set is finished. What I try to do as often as possible when we're making a set is not make anything that's too rigid. And it's that I trace all four corners of the frame constantly. You're really responsible for pulling everything visual together that goes in front of the camera. Finding props, making props, or completely building something from ground up. One of the most important things is learning how to be on a film set. It's such an important work environment to understand your role and everybody else's role.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ajyal Show. Behind every frame, we see a world of creativity and collaboration. A world where every detail matters, from the texture of a prop to the color of a wall. Have you ever wondered who brings these visions to life? Who ensures that these spaces feel authentic and alive? Today, we're thrilled to explore the fascinating world of art direction and set design with an art director whose journey is truly inspiring. Born and raised in Qatar, our guest took her first creative steps in photography before finding her passion in art direction. A mother of two, she now works with the film house where she brought many visions to life on both creative and commercial sets. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Lauren McCarthy, to the show.
Hello,
It is lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I'd love to kind of talk about something that really is cool to me, and it's the fact that you grew up here in Qatar. How was that like?
Home. It's home for me. I had a great childhood here, full of sunshine and good community and good people, good schools, great experiences. And I certainly never planned on being here now. Like a lot of people, I went through school and then I went to university, and opportunities really opened up here in a creative field that never existed when I was a kid and kind of thinking about what I would do with my life. And I'm kind of surprised to still be here, but it's home. We're raising a family here, and we're working in a creative field that we love.
And so growing up here, when was it first that you felt like maybe you had like an inkling toward the arts or inkling towards photography?
I think always through school. I was always interested in art and photography, but I didn't really know what I could do with that. It wasn't until I had a careers advisor suggest to me that I could go and do photography at university. It just wasn't on my radar as something that I could do. I thought I needed a real job instead. And so she had brought to my attention this really great course where it was commercial photography. So it wasn't open-ended. It was really guiding you towards how to make a career at the end of it. And so went ahead, and that was the path that I followed. But what led me there? I don't know. I think it's a slow process of stacking experiences on top of each other.
Do you remember at any point actually like maybe having a camera and kind of going around and taking photos? And how was that like? And do you feel that really ignited?
Yeah, I do. I remember very clearly, I'm pretty sure it was my brother's camera that I had taken ownership over. And I'd struggled to load some 35mm film in it. Was probably way off with my exposures and my focus, but I was experimenting with it. And at the time, it was easy to get film and to get film processed here. And I think I was so excited by that result of being handed a little packet of printed photos, which is something that we really don't get to enjoy so much anymore. But it was that spurred it on. And I mean, I was definitely embarrassed by whatever it was that I'd taken because they weren't great photos, but it was just experimenting with a different tool. I think as well, I used to use it as a door opener to explore places and photograph people that that were around. We would go off on little missions together and break into abandoned buildings and take photos of interesting things like that. And it was probably the beginnings of it there. I think a lot of it had to do with my brother. My brother was very creative, still is. He went off to university and had studied animation at the time, and I probably idolized him. And he poured a lot of time into me as well. And because he was older, he was my ticket to like go out and stay out later. And so that's what we would do. We'd go out and take photos around the city together. That was probably the very beginning of it.
That sounds like such a precious memory. And so you mentioned that you went to the UK to study commercial photography. How was it like to kind of actually be in a space where now you're studying the thing that you're passionate about?
I went in and I did a foundation year in art first, and it was much more general. And in my second year, I specialized in photography. And I think the whole time I was there, I was still in such sort of disbelief that here I was at university to study photography and not like law or science or, something like that. I was really doing something creative. It was a great school with a really great program. And at the time, it was a real mix. When they said commercial photography, it wasn't just commercial photography like what we would imagine now. It was really teaching you how to be a commercial photographer, how to build your own website, how to market yourself, how to operate in the industry. And I think at the time I really wanted to pursue documentary photography. But I was in a great mix of people that were also studying fashion photography at the time. And it just sort of opened my world up to the other possibilities of what we could do.
While you were studying photography and you kind of were getting exposed to all these different types of them, was there a point where you were like, I can't wait to finish so I can actually go in and like bask into this photography field?
A lot of what we were told when we were at university was that it was a very saturated market for photographers and that it was going to be a very, very difficult path to follow. And I think that really sunk in with me, and I realized halfway through university that maybe this wasn't all I wanted to do and that I was probably capable of more in a slightly different direction. And I wished that I could morph that degree into something with film. But I knew that I wanted to finish and get out there. And I knew, because this is what we'd been taught, was that the best path through was to start by assisting. And that taught us a lot about the industry, in that to really manage your expectation, in that I'm not going to step out of university with a degree and just be a photographer. And I think anybody that's on that path in photography or in film really cuts their teeth by moving up through those ranks. And I think that starting as an assistant to somebody with experience is so invaluable. And maybe assisting a couple people or a variety of people. And you learn about different ways that people work, different methods. And that was the goal. But things changed very quickly for me after university.
And so what led you from studying commercial photography and kind of getting prepared to go through the hustles of becoming a photographer to film?
This very building that we're in.
Wow.
I had a couple of weeks, I think it was about 2 weeks after I had graduated, when I was facing this stressful decision about, do I move up to London and begin my struggle as a photographer? I was presented with an opportunity to join the Doha Tribeca Film Festival. And it was in its very early days, and I jumped at the opportunity. And I was on the next flight back to Doha, and I started, and that was 3 months of work in a totally different world than what I had left Doha in. And it was brand new, and it was right at the beginning, and it was just the spark of an idea of, we need to establish a film industry here. And I just thought it was such a tall order, but I wanted to be part of it. And I was really, really lucky to be part of it from the beginning. But it was short-lived. It was only a 3-month project, and then that was it. All these shiny, interesting people were going to go back to where they came from, and I was then going to figure out what I needed to do in Doha. And it was probably 2 months later that we all started getting phone calls to say that they were going to start the Doha Film Institute, and did we want full-time jobs? And that changed everything. That was my start in this very building.
That is such a full circle moment for you to be here and to be sharing that with us. I want to kind of go into your Tribeca Film or Doha Tribeca Film Festival experience. What was your role there? What did you do?
I started out as an assistant, as I should, because I certainly didn't have any experience. I started out as an assistant to the marketing team, the press team, I think. And I was really in the deep end. I was having to call newspapers and see about placing ads for the film festival, coordinating newsletters and flyers and all sorts of things like that. But it was a really, really young, excited team with a lot of other people that had a lot of experience. And so I think I just kind of got caught up in it, and there wasn't really much time to stop and think and worry if I was really well suited for the role. It was just the whole machine was moving, and I wanted to be in it, and I was willing to do anything to be in it.
Wow. And so let's say the journey begins, let's say in Qatar, when you're back at the Tribeca Film Festival. But then how do you go from being an assistant there to then getting led to art direction?
So I worked a couple of years at the Film Institute. I worked in the education department, mostly coordinating workshops, and then moved into production and worked as a production assistant. Again, just doing anything I could to be involved in film. And at the time, DFI were producing quite a few films. We worked on student films, so I was helping other people make what they wanted to make and kind of learning and observing all the while. I then left only because I wanted to pursue other things. I had a passion project that I really wanted to do, and I was probably young and reckless enough that it didn't matter to me if I didn't have a full-time job. I could manage. I didn't have a family I needed to worry about. And my husband had set up a production company, and they had brought out an art director from the UK, and it was my first time ever really working with an art director. And she just needed help because she didn't know where to get things in Doha or where to go, suppliers, fabricators, things like that. And I went in and I assisted her on a film made entirely out of cardboard. I was like, oh, I love this. This is what I should have been doing from the beginning. It was arts and crafts, and it was glue and paint, and it was messy and scrappy, and I absolutely loved it. And I honestly had no idea that that was something I could do. And so I spent the next couple of years assisting her. And then after she left, I was sort of out from underneath her wing and started to take on my own projects. And I was pretty terrified on most of them. But the more you do, the more confident you grow. So that was kind of where my start was.
So I love the little I love that this is what I wanted to do. So for people who don't know what an art director does, because I've heard the term being thrown around a lot, and I can maybe connect the dots and say, oh, something art related, something about how things look or whatever. But what actually does it mean to be an art director?
So you're really responsible for pulling everything visual together that goes in front of the camera. That could be building a set. It could be interpreting a script, finding props, making props, redressing a room that already exists, working with what you have, or completely building something from ground up. And it also is quite different whether you're working on commercials or short films. My start was in commercials, which is probably a lot more restrictive. But it was just, I think I just lacked the awareness that there was this whole world of art directing that I could get involved with. And it suited me so much because it combined a love for kind of creating a frame of something, but also all of the like creative inclinations that I had growing up all rolled into one. And I loved being part of a crew. Part of a film crew was great. It was so exciting. We really found rhythm. We were a great machine that could just make everything and make anything. And I loved it. I got really hooked on it.
And retrospectively, would you say the fact that you studied photography helped you in any way when you actually stepped into the art director role?
Yeah, I do. And I should credit it still because I think it really helped me to establish building a frame. And knowing what things look like in front of the camera. I notice myself doing something really particular every time I look at a monitor when I'm on set, and it's that I trace all four corners of the frame constantly, making sure that it's a frame. Even though we move a lot of the time, it was really about building an image. And I think university really helped me with that. That was something for me to build on, yeah.
And what would you say is like when you're about to start, what's step number one as an art director?
Break it down. Break down the film. I mean, pen and notepad with the script on the desk. And just as I'm reading through, I'm noting every single thing that I know is a physical something that needs to exist. So I then end up with a long list of props that I would need or a particular type of set that we would need to build. And that's my starting point every time. Break down the film into bite-sized pieces that I can then look at as a to-do list and start working through how many days is this going to take me? What am I going to need to do? What materials am I going to need? How many days of build will I need for this? What kind of transportation am I going to need for this? Is this on location? Is this in a studio? And that's always my starting point.
How do you go about choosing the team that's around you that's helping you with the tasks that you need to get done?
So I think that it depends a lot of the time on what the script is. And I would sort of cherry pick people based on what that film requires. There are people that I would use if I was shooting something in the desert when we were building a camp and dealing with camels and horses and all sorts. And then there's a different set of people that I would likely use if we were painting a set, for example. I think you identify people's skill sets and you just pull them in as you need them. Obviously, it's wonderful when you find people that have multiple skill sets. And that pool of people is really growing here as well. I sometimes find it difficult to pull in a team. I really, really like doing it all myself so that I have that control over it. But you can't do it without people. And I have really, really great people that I get to work with.
And what would you say is like a very important skill for like an art director to have? So after you kind of learned these type of things in uni, but like what are some of those skills that are important to have?
I think that you need to be a really good problem solver. I've often considered myself as a creative problem solver. Really flexible because things change constantly. No matter how much you plan, things change. And they can change really quickly and you want to be really prepared for it. And I think another skill that you would really need to be an art director I said, I think you need to listen really well. I think you have to work with lots of different crew and you serve your director and what your director is really trying to bring to life. But you also have to make sure that you're listening to your DOP and that makes sense, and your lighting team, and that they can work with your design too. It ties you all together.
So you mentioned that there's a lot of collaboration that you do with directors and DOPs, and I'd love to know that process. How do you take kind of those physical things and then a vision from a director and just make something that's just beautiful?
I think you need to have a really good working relationship with the director that you're dealing with. And that really comes from a place of, for me, it needs to come from a place of friendship first, just so that it's like a good working environment. But I always find that in order to have a really good relationship, I need time to sit down and really ask my questions and draw out all of that information. And sometimes it might not be all at once. It might be constant messages over WhatsApp and Zoom calls and face-to-face meetings, because it takes time it's a process, right? And maybe the director that you're talking to hasn't thought about those things yet and needs time to think about something visual that relates to their character or their set or their film or whatever it is that they're working on. And then I can take all of that and understand, really, really try and like climb into the director's shoes with them to understand what it is they're trying to see. And it's then aligning that with the DOP, who also has their own idea and their own interpretation of what it needs to look like. And it's just finding that kind of sweet spot in between where you find that flow where it works and you're all speaking the same visual language. And I think you can feel it when it's working, and you can really feel it when it isn't.
Yeah. I mean, when I think about that, that's kind of like, let's say, the aesthetic kind of steps of how something is going to look. But I'm sure like if you're going to actually actualize something, there's a lot of logistics that come into play. So how is it like balancing the aesthetic part, but also keeping in mind that I need to make the logistics work as well?
Yeah, it's a balancing act. I think we're constantly, if you're dealing with set builders or fabricators, it's constant communication about whatever your design is, and if that's going to work with your budget, if that's going to work on a time scale. And so I often feel like when I start on a project that I start spinning plates. And so you start a conversation with this person over here to see what's possible if I go this route. And at the same time, I'm starting a conversation over here to see, is that going to be possible if I go that route? So that you have multiple options, because I think options really help in all scenarios. The logistics can be really tricky, but I think that's, again, where you keep that communication really open with your producer about budget and about timeline, and also about managing expectations for a director. It's really important not to just absolutely promise the world, but to be really realistic and really transparent about what you can do. And I think you do that by sharing visuals of what you're working on, and it's sort of constant updates of this is where we're at with this and this is what we're going to be able to achieve, so that there's no surprises, because nobody wants surprises when they show up on set. That leads to a lot of drama.
And how would you describe, like, do you always find what you're looking for? Like, assume like you have an idea. Like, how would you say, or how would you describe the availability of maybe certain materials and that will help you kind of really bring that picture to life?
That's a challenge. That's really, really frustrating. And it's in those moments that I envy other departments so much, where they get to have their tools and they come to work and they use their tools to do their job and they go home. And instead, I'm on like a ridiculous hunt for something that I absolutely cannot find. We're kind of always hunting for things. But I think what you do, or at least what my process is that whenever I'm out and about, it's like if I see something, I take a photo of it and I remember it. And then it might be months later, it might be years later that I find that photo, I find the location that I took it in and, you know, kind of like backtrack to find things. Prop sourcing here is difficult. You are limited. We've got a little bit more flexibility now with being able to order stuff in a little bit more easily, but then you're running the risk that you haven't had eyes on it. You haven't really checked if it's the right size. But I think we do well to work with what we have. Obviously, bigger productions, bigger budgets, longer timeline means you're able to accomplish a lot more. I have a particular affinity for working with antiques and really special, authentic pieces. And I happen to work with somebody who, on all of the jobs that I work on, he's there. And he's just the most wonderful at going out and finding pieces that have that right texture or aged the right way. But yeah, it's definitely it's not easy.
I'm curious to know, like, do you have a story maybe you could share where, like, let's assume that, I don't know, maybe you were short on time but you had to like make something look a certain way and you didn't have that particular material, but then I have to problem solve because you said it's like an important skill to have. So is there like a funny story or like that comes to mind?
Yeah. It's kind of a really strange one, I think. But so much of this job is really strange and it's not glamorous at all. I was working on a film. It was like 2018. We were out in the desert and it was supposed to be a scene where there was a camel that had just delivered. And they wanted to really show that it was real. And so we were going to need some of that like ooey gooey, like camel afterbirth placenta. And we certainly didn't have the budget all the time to like get a great silicone replica. So I was working with somebody that we work with regularly. And I had said, let's just go to the camel market and see if there's any camels that are about to deliver. I can't believe I'm telling this. And so we did, and so we drove around a couple times. I mean, that we were literally shooting days later. And as we're driving past a pen, there is a camel giving birth. And I had him jump out of the car with a bin bag and run over and grab hold of it off of the floor and put it into a bin bag. And the poor guy that was there had no idea what was happening. He must have thought we were doing the strangest thing. And we took it home and we washed it and we put it in the freezer. And a couple of days later, we took it to set and laid it out in the sand. And it looked great. But it was really, really gross.
I mean, it's a way to solve a problem.
Yeah.
So you said that, of course, like sometimes it's the budget is like kind of maybe might be what's kind of restricting you. And so what I'm curious about is how do you choose what corners to cut?
I think usually when I'm deciding things like that, that's when I'm talking to the DOP about what we're really seeing on set, how the shot moves, and really the extent of the set that we're going to see. I hate having to cut corners because I feel like no matter what, it's still something that's needed on set. And if we don't have it on set, it reflects badly on me. And I don't have that opportunity in the cinema when the film's playing to stand up and be like, oh, sorry guys, like it didn't look so good because we just didn't have enough budget. Like, you know. So I hate having to, but that's usually a conversation that you'd have with a director as well. But we try to be as thrifty as we can and to really stretch a budget as much as possible. And there are ways of doing that. There are materials that you can choose. There are things that you can buy and return, you know, just to really like stretch a budget out. And a lot of the time, especially when it's short films, you find yourself like in like a beg, borrow, steal kind of scenario where you're calling in favors, and people are often quite helpful.
Yeah. So you said that, like, as an art director, you find yourself spinning a lot of plates all the time. So I'm sure that that can be very stressful. So how do you manage that stress on the film set?
Still figuring that out. Yeah, definitely still working that one out. I can't think of very many jobs that I haven't had sleepless nights about beforehand. And I think that really anyone that works in film still feels that way. But I have been thinking about that a lot recently, and kind of wondering, why am I doing this to myself? I get so worked up. I get so stressed out about it not being right. And I realize that anxiety that comes about wanting to make it right is maybe what makes me good at my job, because I'm so worried about the details of it that I won't allow it to just be okay. So I think that maybe with the years of experience I've had now, I know that the anxiety is part of the process, but it maybe drives me to get to a higher level that I want to get to in creating a look that really works. But then I also try to remind myself that it's just a film, and there are bigger things to worry about in the world, especially, to be honest, especially ever since having kids. You know, my priorities are probably quite different. And maybe with a bit more experience too, I'm not maybe as concerned about people pleasing if I'm on set and there are things that are causing stress and causing anxiety. I maybe have a little bit more ability to push back and say, you know what, this is too much. This isn't working. And that's not necessarily a me problem. That might be like a production problem. And I think you guys need to work something out. But that comes with a little bit more time. At the beginning, when you're starting out, I think you just don't want to let anyone down. Because you're part of a crew, you're part of a team, and everyone's pulling their weight, and you just don't want to be that person.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about what happens after the first step. So you said that the first step is breaking it down. So after you break it down and you know what you need, how is it that you show the director or the GOP how you want things to look? What do you bring to the table?
So straight away, I would jump into making a mood board. And oftentimes, your director has also made a mood board to establish what visual language he wants to use in the film. So I might build off of that. Or if I don't have that from a director, I might just start building visuals of what I think we can use, colors that I think would work, or materials, or just really a visual place that you're keeping everything together. I find myself more and more referring back to it almost like my visual Bible all the way through pre-production. And it's not like a one-time make it document that like gets emailed to somebody and then doesn't. It's a real working document which evolves, and references. I mean, so important to have references in there so that when you're explaining something to somebody, they really understand what you're talking about. And then references start to get replaced with actual photos or progress photos as we're building something. But it's so that I can keep that communication with the production constantly open, so they know exactly where I'm at in what we're working on and what they're going to be finding when they arrive on set that day. Yeah, that's but yeah, building a mood board, super important.
Yeah. And so you said that you might add like colors and textures and this type of thing. And do you find that people or like on set are receptive to what that might look like on a screen? Because like if I think about it, like I might not be able to tell the difference of what type of cloth this couch is going to make a difference on the screen. So how do you then find a way to kind of communicate those type of details that maybe the general eye, let's just say, won't be able to see?
I'm not so sure how much of the mood board is for my own reference, for me to keep on coming back to. In my experience, I haven't used kind of my mood board or my references to inform other departments so much. It's really, really more so for myself. But I think that it's just a great visual place to keep a record of everything that you're seeing, all of your options. And then that might be a sit-down conversation with your director or with your DOP where you go through, hey, look, like these are 3 fabrics that I think would really work, or like these are 3 colors that I was thinking of using for the wall. And we have a conversation about it and we filter it down and the mood board changes and we kind of, and it adapts and evolves.
And so my fascination actually is what comes after the mood board. Because I'm sure that everyone has like somewhat of a mood board by themselves, even if they're not designing a set, but like on Pinterest or something. But then how does the actual creating start? Is there a particular maybe part of the set that you start with, or how does that actually move from these pictures that we like the vibe of, to actually we're making this on set?
Yeah, I think it's lots of different directions kind of all at the same time. It's, okay, this is the plan. This is what we want it to look like. Now let's go actually find those pieces. With having lived here a long time, I know a lot of great places to go to source materials and to source whatever it is that we might need. So after the mood board, it's then what are the actuals that we can work with? And then I might be updating the mood board with plans or designs for a set to get built. At the same time, you're costing it and saying, well, is that actually going to fit in budget? And it's, it's kind of always being reworked and redesigned. So yeah, definitely moving into the phase of, okay, this is what we've promised. Now can we actually deliver on it? And what will we really use? And again, it kind of goes through a next level of evolution at that stage too.
You said that you might start like kind of bringing designs to the table so you can actually actualize the whole thing. But are there any specific tools that you use to do that?
You mean like on the computer?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean really simple. Yeah. I mean, I use Keynote.
Okay.
I use Keynote just to make presentations. I think one of the things I've never been so strong at, which I wish was a skill that I had. So for any young up-and-coming art directors, to be able to draw on a computer a design would just be so valuable. But it's not one of my skills, and that's okay because other people know how to do it. But I use Keynote, and then I'm just pulling in images from books or from, well, obviously the internet, mostly the internet, Pinterest, but not so much Pinterest because so much of it is AI now that it's quite difficult to find references on there that aren't totally unattainable. But yeah, I love working with Keynote. I find it really easy and simple and intuitive and just a clean way to present. Because sometimes those mood boards, it's not just going to the director. Sometimes it's, well, a lot of the time it's going beyond your director and going to your client if it's a commercial. And so you really want your stuff to look good.
I'm happy you mentioned AI because I actually am quite curious to ask you is that I'm sure that with commercials, let's assume maybe, as you said, it's a little bit more restrictive. Maybe there's some films that you have to make up places that don't exist. Or so do you think that actually AI has been like a tool that's maybe helpful in the field that you work in?
I would say for me, like the jury's still out. But in maybe the last 2 months or so, I've sort of dipped my toe in and have found it interestingly useful. The experience that I had recently on a film was that somebody gave me an AI reference of an interior that they wanted to set build. And it looked so good. It looked so good. There was no chance. That person, bless them, they didn't have the budget for it. I didn't have the time for it. I would have loved to build a set that looked like that. But it was useful in that it was a reference of this is the direction that I'd really like to go in. But, you know, the longer an image like that sits in a mood board and the longer you become attached to that image, for me, the more room there is there for disappointment when somebody arrives and they're like, oh, my reference looked a lot better than this in reality. But then I also kind of used it in a really interesting way recently, where I used it to generate. I needed a wall filled with drawings and scribbles and sketches, and so we were all actively producing it. But I needed more. I needed more volume, and it was the first time I used it to generate more images, and I just kind of used them tucked into the back. And I didn't feel like a total cheat in doing it. So it's got its uses. But yeah, jury's still out for me.
Yeah. And now I'm trying to think of, like, if I try to think of a set, right? Mm-hmm. For me, maybe my general eye is, okay, like the big pieces of furniture. Mm-hmm. But like, I've seen so many videos online of like set designers and art directors really paying attention to like how like something is painted that's like on the corner of the room.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Because I think that you're really building layers. And I think that that those details are what complete the picture when you're looking at it. And that's the difference between it looking like a set when you're looking at it or it just feeling like something real, that a real space that somebody's in. I think that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions that an art director has made by the time that set is finished. Absolutely tiny details that maybe nobody would ever notice, but that's really important because so much of it is detail that you shouldn't notice because all of that tiny detail builds and builds and it creates layers and that creates reality. And it creates so much more depth in a space. So I think that really it's all in the details.
Oh. And curiously also, how long does it take to like build a set? Like I'm sure it's going to be dependent on the type of project, but like let's assume like maybe if I was to ask you, what's maybe the shortest time you've ever built a set in and then what's the longest?
You could build a set in a day, 2 days. But it depends how much time you have in prep because all of the effort is in prep. Actually physically building and assembling things, that can happen relatively quickly. The time it takes is in preparing and designing and sourcing everything so that by the time it comes to create, you have all of the tools and the materials that you need because you've planned it so well. I think it's the planning that takes a long time. There is a film we did recently. It was a 5-day shoot. And the sets weren't too heavy, but there was so much planning that it must have been at least 25 days of planning that went into it. Similarly, earlier in the year, we shot a film in the desert and we built sets for it. We must have been planning for a month beforehand, just so that by the time we arrived, we know you have limited time on location or limited time on, in a studio or wherever it is that you might be working. And if you haven't planned all of those details and if you don't have all of those materials with you, there's no way that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish there and then on the spot. But we like to work in a way where we're so over-planned and over-organized that you arrive on set, you have everything you need, you build, and your set's, there in maybe 2-3 days max.
And when I think of the word set, right, maybe my brain goes to like the traditional space, like, that black box where you can basically decorate and do whatever you want. But when you have locations that are like the desert, how do you begin to think about, how am I going to design this space that's not bounded?
Yeah. I would say more often than not, the sets that I work on aren't in a studio and they aren't set builds. They're on location and they might be existing spaces already or a lot of the time out in the desert. And it depends on what type of film you're working on. But for me, it's using a lot of, drawing from a lot of references if we're working out in the desert. And taking inspiration from a lot of books. Sometimes when you have a really blank canvas, like the desert, or the beginning of a set build, when you have too many options or too much freedom, it can be a lot harder because sometimes it's hard to decide what to do exactly in that space.
Another thing that kind of popped in my brain that also has to do with kind of this control of the space, or as you said earlier, like you very much think in frames. So when you are designing a set, are you designing it when there's no lights, you know, the lighting? Because I can imagine that plays a huge role also in how things are going to be perceived in the frame. So what are some things that you do to ensure that what you're actually making is going to turn out the way that you want it to in the frame?
In my experience of having built a set and then the lighting team arrive, I am almost always blown away by how much better it suddenly looks. And I think that apart from giving them practical lights that they can use on set, I think it's conversations about trying to understand what it is that the lighting designer is going to do, what it is that the DOP wants. But it's also trusting really good crew that know what to do with whatever space you're able to give them. So long as you are able to create something where they can access it with their lights, and you give them space to do what they're good at, I think you're in a good situation. But yeah, I there's a lot of times I can work on a set and step back and be like, there's something lacking, and then lighting arrive and just give it so much more depth. And I'm like, wow, I couldn't have visualized it that way. It's so much better than I would have wanted.
When I think of like visual things on set, of course I think of the set. I also think of fashion, for example. And I hear a lot of people say, oh, there's like these last minute changes and stuff. If we're thinking about set design, are there these last minute changes that you have to end up doing? And could you maybe share an experience of where maybe you had to do something like that?
Yeah. I mean, last minute changes all the time. I think what I try to do as often as possible when we're making a set is not make anything that's too rigid. Everything needs to be able to be changed and to move, because some things don't work. Some things aren't the right size when you come to use it, or it just doesn't look right on camera. So it's learning to not be too precious about what it is that you've designed, and know that you're there for the greater picture. And if your DOP is telling you, like, I really need this wall to come down, like I need you to cut it in half, or I need you to cut the doors off this tent, it's just not going to work. We're kind of just prepared to do that and make those modifications. And instead of kind of flapping and panicking about not knowing what I'm going to do, it's about just taking a moment to be practical, figure out a quick plan, let your producer know, look, I'm going to need, if we need to make this change, I'm going to need an hour. Can you afford that? And, with the schedule that you have during the day, and then work through the changes kind of practically like that. But yeah, we have a lot of changes.
It's really cool how much of a collaborative effort all of it is. And I want to kind of go back to something you said earlier, which is that you feel like, let's say, working on commercial sets, or maybe it was more restrictive than film sets. I'd love to hear why you think they're different.
Obviously, on commercials, we often have a client on set, and you have an agency a lot of the time. They're more restrictive because people are really trying to satisfy the needs of a brand. which means people maybe aren't so confident in how creative they can be or how much they can change direction on set. If they have a plan and the plan was approved, this is what we need to deliver. On a commercial set, it can sometimes feel like these are the images that we have sold to the client and we are here to collect those images. We build them, we record those images because that's what they need for their brand. So there isn't always that flexibility. On a short film, it is a lot easier. Things can change, ideas can develop on the spot. And I think people work differently on short films than they do on commercials. There's a lot more soul in it. There's a lot more love being poured into a film. Different environment, I think.
And I'm curious to know, I'm sure that maybe you've had some projects where maybe the set that you're building needs to mimic something that we've already seen. And maybe there's also some sets that you have to create a place maybe that doesn't so much exist. Mm-hmm. So how does your approach differ when you're approaching like designing a set that needs to be familiar and then designing a set that's a new place and something that's out of maybe someone's imagination? Or like is there one that you enjoy more than the other?
Yeah, I think I enjoy being at the beginning of a project and creating something new. At the same time, it fills me full of that fear of doing something new. But a blank slate is really fun to work with. Your options are endless.
I'm sure that like throughout this whole entire thing, if you're going to be moving from set to set, because it is a hustling lifestyle where you're constantly going from one set to another. Maybe some sets look the same, maybe sets look completely different. I'm curious to know how you kind of stay inspired through it all and how do you keep that creative juice flowing?
I would say that a lot of the time, like no two sets really feel the same. Every film that I work on seems to have a totally different list of requirements, which makes it feel very different each time. And because a lot of the time it's unfamiliar, there's kind of that space to learn something and to grow and to be out of my comfort zone. I don't know if I would say that keeps me creatively inspired, but it keeps me on my toes. And maybe that's the same thing. And then sometimes there are commercials or jobs that you go on that don't creatively inspire you whatsoever, but it's your job and it's what you're there to do and that's how you pay your bills. And sometimes that's the most important thing on that particular job. So it differs, definitely. I wouldn't say that I go from one super creative experience to another super creative experience. That would be amazing, but it's not reality. Sometimes it's just got to go to work.
Is there a particular project that you worked on that really stands out for you? Like, whether it's because you really love what you made or whether it was because, I don't know, you worked with particular people. Are there, like, maybe these, like, key milestone, like, or what would they call them, core memories? Or
Yeah, there is. And I would say it was sort of the first short film that I ever worked on as an art director. I loved the script so much. And I loved the props that we had for it. It was Kashta. And it was such a great experience being out in the desert and filming with these young kids who were non-actors but were doing amazing things on camera. And we had so much fun and it was so stressful. And I just really loved it. And it was maybe kind of a first time for me really feeling like I was kind of spreading my wings on a project and that somebody had put trust in me to do that as well. So I think I really cut my teeth on that film. And even still, years later, I can watch it. And even though there's things that I wish I did that differently or I could have done that so much better. it sits really close to my heart. It was a really, it was a really great experience that I'll keep forever, for sure.
You said that you use a lot of references when you're going to do your mood boards and things like that. And I feel like another thing that really inspires us is a lot of our personal experiences. And you said you're a mother. And I'd love to know maybe how being a mother, maybe, has it changed the way maybe you approach your art direction? Has it inspired you in a different way?
I think, I wouldn't say it's changed the way visually that I work, but it's changed my methods of working. It's forced me to be a lot more organized, better time management, and also not getting caught up in absolutely like breaking my back on a job, because ultimately I have 2 little people that I need to be there for first. But it's made me, a lot more conscious of the hours that I spend on the job, so that I can be done and then I'm there for them for the rest of the day. Instead, I think before they came around, I would work morning till late at night, 24 hours a day, whatever it was. You just did whatever it was that you needed to do to get it done. So I think I'm much better with planning and time management now. I'd say that's definitely my biggest change.
I took visual arts when I was in school, and something that my teacher would tell me all the time is, as an artist of any sort, you need to always be confident in kind of some of the decisions that you choose or the directions that you need. So given that you're an art director, I'm sure that there are a lot of decisions that you have to make. How do you stand your ground sometimes? Or even the other bit is, how do you sometimes know, okay, maybe...
I struggle so much with that. I am so bad with making decisions, and I will leave it till the last possible minute to commit to the color of that wall or what it's going to be, for example. In a lot of areas of my life, I struggle with decision making, and sometimes it can be really paralyzing as well. But in this job, you have to. You're in a position where you have to make decisions and you have to commit to them. And so I think in order to be so sure of something, I do as much research as I can. I try to do as many mock-ups as I can so that I have the chance to see really what's it going to look like before somebody picks up a paintbrush and starts painting. Have I been able to visually work that out, work out all those details? And I think that you're constantly spinning through all of those elements, all of the visual things you're going to be seeing. Is everything going to work really well together? I find being able to bounce those ideas off of somebody really helps. Sometimes that stops a lot of the noise that's in your head. It can kind of be a lonely place also when it's, you have to make these decisions and be really resolute in them. So I think you feel so much reassurance when you know that you're part of a crew and part of a team where you can share opinions and share ideas. But then also years of experience also remind you that it's okay to be confident in your decisions and things always work out in the end. And I haven't been in so many situations where I'm standing on a set in deep regret of what it is that we've done. And I think I always have like a backup plan as well, just in case.
Wow. And, I find it really inspiring that you kind of said, I use Keynote and I bring all these ideas together. And, I'm sure there's some people that say, I don't know how to draw, or I don't know how to do. And so aside from just having confidence in decisions that you have to make, how do you also, trust in yourself to feel like, I am worthy of this role and I've been doing this for a long time. So how do you also keep that voice?
I usually get to that stage by the end of the production. No, I find the planning stage of a film really stressful. I do. But by the time we get onto set and we start dressing a space and I start to see it taking its form, that confidence, you know, I'm soothed, I'm calmer knowing that it's all coming together and that I've got all of the right pieces. And I think that a successful project drives you on to the next one. And you're like, I know I can do this. I know it'll be okay in the end. But it's definitely a process to get there.
And which I'm most interested in actually, this is a question I've been dying to ask you, is what is the feeling like when you know, they're ready to film and now the set is done? Like it actually has all come together. Like if I was to ask you to describe that feeling.
Firstly, a little bit of relief that it's all worked out. You know what? There is a delight in knowing that you have created a visual landscape for a DOP to work in or a director to direct their actors in. I love that moment on set when I get to step back and feel like, for a moment, my job's done. And then a couple seconds later, somebody needs something and you have to jump right back in. But it is a great sense of satisfaction. Sometimes it feels a little bit like you've created a little bit of like art in motion, especially if you've got a moving shot. But I don't know, I really love the feeling that you have with the crew. It's not seeing the shot afterwards when you're done. It's that moment of knowing that you've built an environment for everybody to work in and it's exactly what it needs to be.
I also want to ask this question because I feel like a lot of the way that sometimes we think is that, I need to study something in uni so I can work in this thing. And my question to you is like, do you think a person needs to maybe study something very artistic in order to get into this line of work? Would it be more helpful? What do you think?
Sure, it would help, but I don't think that you absolutely have to. I think that you can be, I think that you can really learn these skills on the job, assisting, working your way up. I think there's plenty of experience that you can get, trial and error, trying things at home. Yeah, I mean, a degree would be great. If I were to do things over, I would love to go and have really studied production design. I think that would have been great. It would have given me a faster start, but I don't think that you absolutely have to. I work with people regularly whose background is interior design or fashion or anything sort of remotely creative. And I think so long as somebody has a creative eye and a hunger for it, I think you can apply skills. I think you can gain experience. I think one of the most important things is learning how to be on a film set, whether you're being creative or not. That it's such an important work environment to understand your role and everybody else's role.
Yeah. And I still can't get the sound of your voice saying how much you fell in love with art direction when you were as assistant, like at the beginning. But after now reaching a point where you're your own art director, is there something new that you find yourself falling in love with in art direction that maybe you didn't see back then?
I think the more I do, the more I realize what's possible. And I think on each job that I'm on, there's a moment on each of them where I'm kind of sitting back thinking, the next one, I'll do it bigger. I'll do it this way. And so I think that I lacked vision when I was young. I was I'm not saying closed-minded. What I mean by that is this was the sort of world that I was operating in, and I didn't realize how big that world could be and what the possibilities were. And I kind of see like a long road ahead of me where things get bigger. and what we do gets better. And I just kind of always remind myself, like, I'm on that track, and I'm not there yet at all. I have a long, long way to go. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the beauty, and I think us humans in general, is that we can always grow, which I think is a really nice thing. And for people who were in your shoes, who are now maybe aspiring to become art directors, what advice would you give them?
I would say find other like-minded people that you can build ideas with, that you can get out there and try things with. It's a great line of work. It's really varied. Keeps you on your toes. No day is the same as the day before. But I think really harness those skills on how you visually present to a client, to a director, whatever it is your plans are. The stronger and the quicker you're able to assemble a visual presentation of what it is that you want to create, the more booked you'll be on jobs, the more people will take you up on your word. And I think the more success that you would have. I wish I had those skills when I was younger. But that comes with time. And watch film. Watch film. It inspires you so much, and the possibilities are limitless on what you can create.
It has been an absolute pleasure learning all about art direction and set design. I think I'm going to leave this conversation knowing a ton more about how much it takes to actually make something feel like home as you're watching it in some way, or something that's comfortable. So I do want to thank you so much for your time and your insight. And
Thank you.
I'm excited for everyone just to see this.
Thank you so much.